All right, I'll start with a kavanah before our bracha. So again, we come together out of the brokenness with war, strife, and division. Our hearts broken by yet another tragic episode of children as victims of gun violence. Seeking wholeness together in the study of Torah. May we find the wholeness, the shlema, and the shalom that we seek. Let's say our bracha, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. All right, today's opening question. Do you have a sibling, older, younger, or maybe even a twin, with whom your relationship over time has evolved to a state of greater or lesser equality of position?
Sure.
Greater or lesser?
Yes,
Oh,
equality of position.
What do you mean of position?
Oh, I'm just leaving it really vague. Could
Okay.
mean all sorts of different things.
I have a sister who's 7 years older than I am. And I don't think she was too happy when I was born because she had really been the cock of the walk. And we really didn't have a relationship until I was 19. And then she was living in Israel that time, and we became quite close. And in all the years between, which is a lot of years, it's had its ups and downs. There was a time when Leela, my sister's name is Leela, and she didn't live in the same city as me. And I was where my parents were, and really the main support from my parents. And I sort of took the role of the older sibling. And she was extremely supportive. And then, you know, life goes in different ways. And my marriage broke up, and she took over the role of the older sibling and really helped me through it a lot. And we've had our ups and downs, but, you know, we know that we're sisters. And although we could get angry at times, we come together and we try to support each other as best we can. And now that Annette's on, I couldn't say this before. I have to tell it, like, I'm glowing. My granddaughter and grandson were here last night, and I am going to be a great grandmother.
I'm glad this moment's on tape.
Yeah. I've got weights holding me down because
Yeah.
I'm really, But it's my
Mazel
baby,
tov.
When's the
and I
baby
have
due?
permission to say it. So you
When's
guys
the
are
baby due?
it's the first time I've said it out loud to not family.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
When's the baby due?
believe it or not, in October. But and I'm not going to be here. But both Cassie and Chris were both preemies, so they said it'll probably be before.
That's
Wait,
wonderful news.
I can't remember. When are you away?
I'm leaving right after Yom Kippur. That's when I go to Croatia, etc.
Oh, right.
But I promised them babysitting, and they're in Boston, which is
Yeah.
so sweet.
Oh
Wow.
my God, that's so exciting.
Wonderful.
Oh, congrats,
Yeah.
Mazel Tov.
Yes.
Thank you.
Annette, Shabbat Shalom, welcome. Did you?
Shabbat Shalom. Sorry, I'm late.
That's okay. Did you hear the opening question, or should I repeat it?
No, I'm sorry. You have to repeat it.
Yeah. No problem. Do you have a sibling, older or younger, with whom your relationship over time has evolved to a state of greater or lesser equality of position? So that's the question.
God.
So, but I do want to go
You
back.
have all day, Rich?
Yeah, I have all day, exactly. Well, we can edit, but yeah, we don't have all day. But I did want to just comment on Merle, that very lovely story about, the kind of twisting and sinuous nature of the relationships with our siblings, and how it, you see that bond over time, that you are sisters through it all. So that was very beautiful. Thank you. Anyone else have some thoughts? Nancy, I see your hand.
I have a sister who's 2.5 years older than me. and we got along as children, but as we grew up in, some manner, I became, quote unquote, more successful professionally than she did. And there was a lot of resentment from her part. She felt that I always looked down on her. She was incredibly sensitive. And we were not close at all. And when my parents were diminishing, she was always resentful that I wasn't giving enough, or I was away working too much. And then my parents passed away, and we had to empty the house together. And we had some really good times remembering our childhood and our parents together. And since that time, we've just become closer. And it was just coincidentally yesterday, she sent me this long, really sweet email about, how much she respected me. And it was just totally sympathetic and sweet. And it was the nicest thing she'd ever wrote to me. So,
Yeah, what a beautiful story. And it's so interesting to hear how your reconciliation came over the aftermath of the death of your parents, because so often that becomes something that's fraught as people descend and try to figure out how to divide things up, or the thing that held them together was their parents. And so the passing of the parents is that, license to just kind of separate and get away from each other, but it drew both of you closer. So that's just wonderful. And how nice to receive that email.
Yeah, really sweet.
Yeah.
Really touched me.
Claudia is joining us. Shabbat Shalom, Claudia.
Shabbat Shalom.
Okay, anyone else want to jump in on that one? Yes, Annette.
So I have two younger brothers. One's over 4 years younger, one's 11 years younger. So as children, we were not particularly close. The one who's 11 years younger, I sort of mothered. So we were close in that way. But as but we've always kind of had a bond because of the dysfunction of our family when we were young. As adults, we grew closer. But my brother, who's over 4 years younger, his wife, as we've all aged, has really developed an animosity toward our family that we don't understand. And in order to, quote, keep peace in his family, my brother has sided with her. So that's created distance sadly, between him and my other brother and me, which has developed, which has developed a closeness between my brother, who's 11 years younger, and me, because we have become my sister-in-law's enemy for reasons we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And it's put quite a strain on both our relationships with our brother, which is hard.
Wow, how complicated, and also to understand how you bonded, in the protection of each other, given your family of origin, and then you could have that closeness and then lose that closeness because of the new family and it's just really, there's a novel in there. I understand why we need more time.
It's been very painful. Well, and my sister-in-law and I used to be close, and then she just kind of drifted off without telling me why. So whatever.
Well, maybe there'll be another chapter in this, because these stories, we're kind of moving in and out of closeness.
I don't think any of us are going to live long enough, Rich, but that's a nice thought.
May you live long enough. Okay, thank you for sharing that. On to the Parshat. We're in the book of Vayikra. This is the book of the priests. It's the handbook for the priests called Sefer HaKohanim. The Mishkan has been built. We spent a lot of time on it at the end of Shmot. The priests are about to be inaugurated, and that's where Tzav, Parshat Tzav comes in. Aaron is going to be at their head as the Kohen Gadol, the big priest, the big kahuna. This is the biggest day of Aaron's life. He will in a moment be in charge of the many types of sacrifices that achieve closeness with God, detailed in the first Parshat of Vayikra. At the end of Exodus, Moses erects the tabernacle for the first time, and there's great detail about how he lights the lamps and he puts the tablets in the Ark of the Covenant. He lights the incense altar and does a burnt offering, a meal offering, and he puts water in the laver. And as soon as he finishes the work and exits the Mishkan, this cloud descends, signaling when access will be permitted and when it will not. Aaron, after this inauguration, will be permitted to enter behind the parochet, the curtain. In preparation for this solemn inauguration, according to Ibn Ezra, Moshe went through this ritual every day for 7 days of putting the Mishkan together, doing the services, taking it apart. 7 days to train and teach Aaron and his sons in the service of the Mishkan. And in next week's Parsha, Shmini, which Nancy gave us a very short sneak preview of, is named for the 8th and final day of the inauguration ceremony. But where we are here is day 1. So in liturgical time, I'm sure Pesach, it's when everybody's like, oh my God, yes, we got to get ready for Pesach. Starts Wednesday night, 14th of Nisan. Many of us will gather for Seder, perhaps our most beautiful tradition. To quote one rabbi, I can't remember what I had for dinner last week, but we know what we had for dinner 2,000 years ago. I mean, that's a very special thing about Pesach. On the second night of Pesach, we'll commence the counting of the Omer, 49 days of self-reflection on the virtual journey to Har Sinai on Shavuot to commemorate the giving of Torah. All right, so let's dive in. Let's go to the middle of the Parsha, chapter 8, verses 1 through 9. And this opening ceremony that I talked about is getting underway. So, Ashley, do you have a chumash?
Yes, I do.
Oh, wonderful. There we go. Could you read us chapter 8, verses 1 through 9?
Gladly. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take Aaron along with his sons and the vestments, the anointing oil, the bull of purification offering, the 2 rams, and the basket of unleavened bread, and assemble the whole community at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Moses did as the Lord commanded him, and when the community was assembled at the entrance of the tent of meeting, Moses said to the community, this is what the Lord has commanded to be done. Then Moses brought Aaron and his sons forward and washed them with water. He put the tunic on them, girded him with the sash, clothed him with the robe, and put the ephod on him, girding him with the decorated band with which he tied it to him. He put the breastpiece on him, and put into the breastpiece the Urim and the Thummim. And he set the headdress on his head, and on the headdress in front, he put the gold frontlet, the holy diadem, as the Lord had commanded Moses.
Thank you, Ashley. So, I mean, this is just
the Urim and the Thummim.
The Urim and the Thummim, yes. So the majesty of the moment, and you can imagine it's the adult males were counted at 600,000. So we've got, over 1 million people, and definitely bigger than the 2016 inaugural. But anyway, so this is this, solemn moment, and the ceremony continues in chapter 8 and verses 22 and 23. How about Nancy? Why don't you go ahead and read us verse 22 and 23?
Okay, and he brought near the second ram, the ram of the investitures, and Aaron and his sons leaned their hands upon the ram's head, and he slaughtered it. And Moses took some of its blood and placed it on the cartilage of Aaron's right ear, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot.
There, thanks, Nancy. So there's this symbolic ritual of the smearing of the blood, smearing the blood. And I want you to look at verse 23, to look at the first word. And tell me, what do you see in the first word?
Slaughter.
Slaughter. What do you see above the first word?
A little dot.
A little squiggly line? Did people
Yeah,
see that?
over the chet.
Yeah. So that is a Torah trope called Shalshelet, which means the chain. You probably have never seen this Torah trope because it appears 4 times in the Torah, and only 4. Most of the tropes appear kind of all over the place. But this trope, the Shalshelet, is this very unusual trope that appears 4 times. Does everybody see it?
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
the other thing, after the Shalshelet, the word with the Shalshelet, there's this vertical line known as the Pesik. And that vertical line means pause. So attention is being called to this word by Yishchat. And the question is, what does it mean? And I think what we're going to do today is we're going to go to each of the 4 instances of Shalshelet in the Torah, and we're going to see, as we meander through them, do we get to a point that helps us interpret this word by Yishchat. That's what we're going to do today. So let's go to Genesis. This is why you need your chumash. We're going to be hopping around a little bit. 3 of these are in Genesis, and the 4th is here. So the first one, we're going to go to Genesis 19, 15 through 16.
Vayira.
All right, so I'm going to set the scene for the first Shalshelet. Genesis 19, verses 15 through 16. At the beginning of 19, this is when the 3 angels appear to Abram. He's in the front of the tent in the heat of the day. One of the angels is coming to deliver the good news that a child is to be born. The other 2 are coming because of the destruction of Sodom. And their mission, and maybe it's partly destruction, but they're there to save Abraham's nephew, Lot. All right, so Claudia, do you have the Chumash in front of you in the place?
As dawn broke, the angels urged Lot on, saying, "Up, take your wife and your 2 remaining daughters, lest you be swept away because of the iniquity of the city." Still he delayed. So the men seized his hand and the hands of his wife and his 2 daughters in the Lord's mercy on him, and brought him out and left him outside the city.
Okay, thank you. What is the word?
Where was the Torah trope? Because I had to go get the book. I was on Safaria, so I had
Yeah. So what's the word that has the Shalshelet?
Mama.
Vayitmama, which I don't know if people have different translations. It's the first word of the second verse.
Still,
He hesitated.
He hesitated.
Yeah.
He hesitated.
and this says still he delayed.
Delayed. Okay. Hesitated, delayed. Does anybody else have a different translation?
Tarried.
Tarried. Okay. All right. So they all have kind of the same sense of kind of reluctance or whatever. So a very interesting thing, people debate whether it's linguistically right, but that word vayitmama has included in it the Hebrew word ma twice, as in what do I do? What do I do? And so there is this sense of indecision. And so the question is, what was Lot's indecision? Why is he unable to leave when these divine beings have come to him and warned him that you got to get out of here or you're going to be incinerated? What was his delay?
Didn't want to leave home.
He didn't want to leave home. That's very logical and straightforward, particularly.
And didn't one of his daughters stay behind? Because they sent the spy, he went and told them to come, and I think one daughter and the son-in-law didn't want to come.
Interesting. I did not
I
know
think
that.
so.
Okay.
Wasn't it the lure of a sinful life that made him not want? Isn't that what the story is trying to tell us? He couldn't make a clear break from this sinful, sex-filled, awful place.
Interesting. That's
Was he at all concerned about the rest of the people in the town?
well, that's interesting. There is a midrash that says that Lot felt that he was under special protection as Abraham's nephew, and that if he didn't leave, Sodom would not be destroyed. So that's definitely, there's a strain of midrash that supports that.
If you look at 14,
Yeah.
he goes and he tells his son-in-law, but the son-in-law looked at him as one who jests. They didn't believe him. They didn't come.
Ah,
So
okay.
it's only his wife and 2 daughters that went.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I just assumed that everybody went, so thank you for pointing that out. Like 3 chapters before, Abraham and Lot split because their herds are too large to be supported by the same land. And that's where Lot goes off to Sodom because he sees that the plain is well watered. So he's become a man of property there. And Nancy, I think when you say it's hard to leave home, part of what's hard to leave is all of your property. And he basically had to run away with nothing. So he probably hesitated there as well. But anyway, that certainly it illustrates that when that moment of hesitation comes, we're called upon to think about the motivations of the character and exactly what is the hesitation. And that's a rich place of ambiguity to fill in. The working hypothesis from this is that Shalshelet is a word or signifies a word of indecision. So let's go to the next one, which is Genesis chapter 24, and we are going to do 2 through 12. And to set the context, this is the story after the death of Sarah. Abraham asks his servant, reputed to be Eliezer, but referred to in this story merely as the servant, to find a wife for Isaac. And Annette, do you have it in front of you? Could you read it for us, please?
And Abraham said, servant of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, put your hand upon my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but will go to the land of my birth and get a wife for my son Isaac. Do you want me to keep going?
I'll keep going. We're going to go to verse 12.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. And the servant said to him, what if the woman does not consent to follow me to this land? Shall I then take your son back to the land from which you came? Abraham answered him, on no account must you take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from my native land, who promised me on oath, saying, I will assign this land to your offspring, he will send his angel before you, and you will get a wife for my son from there. And if the woman does not consent to follow you, you shall then be clear of this oath to me, but do not take my son back there. So the servant put his hand under the thigh of his master Abraham and swore to him as bidden. Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and set out, taking with him all the bounty of his master. He made his way to Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nahor. He made the camels kneel down by the well outside the city at evening time, the time when women come out to draw water. And he said, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, grant me good fortune this day and deal graciously with my master Abraham.
Thank you. Okay, the Shalshelet on this one is the first word of verse 12. I didn't point out last time, by the way, that the one with Lot also had a pasik afterwards. All of these Shalshelet instances have a pasik to really make you stop and scratch your head as to what's going on. So on this one, I think it comes up on the word Vayomer, and he said, so yes, Claudia.
So I assume the pasuk is not in the Torah scroll, that it's because the Torah trope isn't in the scroll either, so these are
Yes.
additions from the Masoretic time, or?
That's a good question. I think the cantillations are later than Masoretic, if I'm remembering correctly. They're much later, but the Pesach is probably there from before. I don't know when they date from.
But it's not on the scroll itself. It's
Not on the scroll.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah. So what is Eliezer's hesitation?
Well, he's about to do something that isn't done or hasn't been done, which is to make a personal prayer for guidance or for help.
Can I just seize upon what you just said?
Seize away.
Okay, so you said he's making a plea for guidance or help. Why does he need guidance or help?
Well,
What
he's
is-
going to pick the woman who's going to who's going to parent the nation.
And how does he know who's the right one?
That's exactly what he's asking help
He
for.
needs guidance.
That's what he needs. His confusion is, I'm on this big mission. I have no idea how to fulfill it. I don't know what I'm looking for. And so that's his moment of appeal to say, show me the way. And then we all know the story. Rebecca comes in and she's the one who's willing to water all the camels. And, he's like, and Eliezer says, I'll know the person who's willing to water my camels. And then lo and behold, she comes up. Yes, Annette.
Well, it's not just that how will he know the woman? What if he knows her and she rejects him?
Yes, he's
And then
asked that.
the whole house of cards falls apart. My God, what a
Right.
burden.
There's a lot behind that prayer. Not only show me the one, but let her say yes.
Let her know she's the one. I mean, she's got to say yes when she isn't even going to meet the man that she's going to be betrothed to.
Right.
Which may be common in those days, but it's a bit, it's a big ask.
It's a big ask. It's a bold person, or maybe someone who really wants to get out. That could be too. That's a history of people who left Aram Naharaim. Great. So here's an interesting midrash on. I'm sorry. Yes, Claudia.
This is not my own figuring out. It's in my Chumash. It said, this unnamed servant of Abraham is the first person whom scripture records as praying for personal guidance at a critical moment. So I thought, this is a pretty big deal. I would go into silence. I would take a breath. I would, all the things we do as we prepare, as we approach God. He's approaching God with a personal prayer. It's like, so why not pause, hesitate outside of the whole context of why he's praying?
So this is to Ashley's point, right? That of the first instance, and it's interesting because you can see if the chain of Shalshelet can sustain that alternate hypothesis, is that these are firsts or these are prayers. The strand of interpretation that I've run into is about indecision. Let me give you another take on Eliezer's indecision from the Midrash. There are comments, Rashi is on this, others, that say that Eliezer was hoping that his daughter would marry Isaac and inherit everything. And his indecision is, do I go forward with this mission and find someone who would basically, remove the possibility that my daughter would marry him? So the sages are not particularly kind to Eliezer on this. Anyway, so he's under the weight of that Shalshelet. Okay, so let's go to the third one. The third one happens in the story of Joseph.
By the way, as you're going through this, can you give us a rendition of how this trope is supposed to sound?
You will hear it.
All
I'm
right.
glad you asked me that question, Ashley. I'm ready for you.
Good. All right.
We'll hear it in a little while. All right, so let's go to the next one. Genesis chapter 39, the Joseph story, and it's verse 7. And Merle, you haven't read yet, have you?
No.
chapter 39, verse 7. We're going to read 7 through 12. I'm just going to set the context very briefly. Joseph, young man, 17, sold into slavery by his brothers, gets sold to Potiphar and becomes the chief servant of Potiphar, this rich Egyptian's house. Okay, go ahead.
After a time, his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused. He said to his master's wife, "Look, with me here, my master gives no thought to anything in this house. All that he owns, he has placed in my hand. He wields no more authority in the house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except yourself, since you are his wife. How could I do this most wicked thing and sin before God?" And as much as she coached Joseph day after day, he did not yield to her request to lie beside her and to be with her.
All right. So the word, everybody see it in verse 8 in the Hebrew?
Yep.
Vayima'in, but he refused. There's the Shalshelet, there's the Pasik. Why is the Shalshelet here?
He may have been torn.
He thought about it.
He was torn. How is he torn?
Well, he's 18 years, he was 17, 18 years old. This beautiful woman is begging her to have sex with him, and
Yes.
it must have been mighty tempting.
Yes, absolutely. I think, our memories are not that faded that we can't go back there and say that must have been tough. And Rabbeinu Bachya, in addition to noting the Shalshelet of indecision, fancifully illustrates the dilemma and how torn Joseph was by saying that at the very moment of temptation, Joseph saw in his mind's eye his father Jacob admonishing him to stay true to his morals. So we've got a pattern, seems to be set, Shalshelet as the marker of indecision. And sometimes the cause of indecision seems intuitive and clear, sometimes a little bit less so, and certainly the rabbis jump in with all sorts of interesting interpretations. Now, to respond to Ashley's question of what does this sound like?
Yeah,
So let me see if I can hopefully share my screen.
I actually did this for a portion at one of my granddaughter's bat mitzvahs, and I remember that. I did the lot one.
Oh, you
All
did?
right, here we go.
All right.
Hi, welcome back to Torah Trope. Next Torah Trope group, Shalshelet. Very squiggly looking thing. Personally, I think this is the most fun trope group in the entire Torah, and it only appears 4 times. So, Shalshelet is actually what's known as an arpeggio, right? And when you sing it, you can't help but smile. It's such great trope. It goes like this. Shalshelet. See, isn't that fun? Let's just...
Okay. So that's what it sounds like. And while I'm sharing here, you can see this is what it looks like as you've been looking, always followed by the Pasik. What I like about the sound of the Shalshelet is it has that kind of wandering quality, right? Of your psyche trying to figure out what to do. It's kind of meandering. And the zigzag is kind of the same way as you zigzag between, do I do this, do I do that? So there's something beautifully evocative, whatever the equivalent of onomatopoeia is, it sounds like what it is. It's, that's what I love about
Wavering.
that.
It's a wavering sound.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, but then in the Parsha that we're doing, it's about slaughter. Why would he be wavering there?
Thank you for leading me with that question. So let's return to our Parsha. My
There's the
God,
segue you were looking for,
you
Rich.
guys are playing your roles to perfection. It's unbelievable. Thank you. So returning to the Parsha, 4th Shalshelet, 4th link in the chain, we have to remember where we are in time. This is Aaron's inauguration day, the capstone of his leadership of the people. We hit the moment when Moshe is about to sacrifice the ram of ordination, and Moshe hesitates. So why, at this moment of glory for Aharon, is he hesitating? So go ahead. The Midrash mob needs to jump in. Go ahead, Annette.
Let's go back to your original question about us and our siblings and Moshe maybe not wanting to give his brother the glory.
Okay. Yeah, I think that you're definitely on to something there, right? That maybe
I
there's
know, but I
something.
never would have gotten there without your original question.
Well, that's the purpose of the original question. So here's the question. What's the issue? Well, what do we think is the issue? So there's something of kind of reluctance there. He doesn't want to grant it to his sibling. What does it mean about, what is it about their relationship?
Well,
I'm
Moshe,
Here's where he's really separating church and state. He's giving the church to his brother and keeping the state. He had it unified before.
Interesting. He's giving up some power. Go ahead, Ashley. I hear.
I'm not buying this at all. What we need to be mindful of is this is not like there's been a long established chain of hierarchy and ritual and people wait in line in the committee before they get to be the chair of the committee and then they get to be the chair of committees. It's not like that at all. This is the first time. This is it being established. There's no anticipation of elevation to this sacred position that everybody's been coveting forever, and they've seen other people come up the ranks to it. It's not like, making partner in a law firm and then being, the principal or the managing partner. It's not like that at all. It's the first time it's being established. Moses he's not covetous of his brother's ascension. It's Moses who's following his orders from God.
Yeah.
I don't buy that at all.
Well, I don't know. Maybe someone's going to take the other side of that. Go ahead, Annette.
I'm emphatic, but I may be wrong.
I disagree with you, Ashley. Moses has always been the big dude. He went up to Sinai. He did everything. And the only reason Aaron's around is because Moses had trouble speaking, and Aaron is his voice. Aaron says what God and Moses tell him to say. And now Aaron's getting a role of his own. That's threatening if you're in competition with your siblings. Now, I was never in competition with my siblings because they were the opposite sex and they were too far apart in age. But I've watched a lot of siblings in competition. And when one person has all the power and all the big jobs, and suddenly you made the case yourself, and all of a sudden the other sibling is given a separate job that's not connected to the sibling who's had all the power, that's threatening.
That's well put. Ashley, what do you think? You warming up?
This
He's
would be
all warmed
fun.
up.
I would say I disagree completely, because Moses is telling Aaron what to do. He's carrying God's word. I mean, what could be more elevated than doing the bidding directly of God? I just
Moses may not
disagree
like
that there's
God's word. This is creating the priestly class. This is a really big deal.
Yeah, I do think, Annette, that you very much have your finger on this. And what I want to do is, I want to share a bunch of texts that expand on the relationship between Moshe and Aharon as a sort of a backdrop on how we got here. So I think the first thing, and I think, Annette, you alluded to this, the episode at the burning bush, after the burning bush in Exodus 4, this is our introduction to Aharon. And so here, Ashley.
what do you want me to read?
I want you to go to Exodus 4, and we're going to read 8 through 14, and I'm just going to give very brief context. Exodus 4, starting with verse 8 through 14. So God asks Moshe to be the messenger to Pharaoh, the agent for deliverance. Moshe says, what if they don't believe me? and God gives him 3 wonders that he can perform, right? Turning the rod into the snake and back, putting his hand into the cloak and coming out with sarat and putting it back and it's clean.
Right.
And then pouring
Moses as magician, right?
Moses, a magician, but pours blood, water of the Nile onto the ground, becomes blood. So verse 8.
And if they do not believe you or pay heed to the first sign, they will believe the second. And if they are not convinced by both these signs and still do not heed you, take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you take from the Nile, will turn to blood on the dry ground. But Moses said to the Lord, please, O Lord, I have never been a man of words, either in times past or now, that you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. And the Lord said to him, who gives man speech? Who makes him dumb or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, and I will be with you as you speak and will instruct you what to say. But he said, please, O Lord, make someone else your agent. The Lord became angry with Moses, and he said, there is your brother Aaron the Levite. He, I know, speaks readily. Even now, he is setting out to meet you, and he will be happy to see you. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth. I will be with you and with him as you speak, and tell both of you what to do.
Okay, that's it right there. That's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So as Annette was saying, right, Aaron is pulled in because of Moshe's reluctance. Rashi comes in, and on the very end there of verse 14, where he says, Aaron will be happy to see you. This will echo one of the comments made in response to the opening question. He will be happy to see you, not as you believe that he will be angry with you because you've attained a high position. So there's no sibling jealousy that's going to be there on Aaron's part. And in consequence of this, Aaron was privileged to wear the ornament of the breastplate, which was placed over his heart. Back to the Urim and Tumim, Ashley, that you loved so. So there's this issue of, is there sibling jealousy? Is there not? Aaron is the kind of person, according to this Rashi, this tradition, who was not jealous, despite the fact that Aaron is the older one, right? And so Moshe is coming into more prominence, and he could potentially have viewed that as a usurpation. Rashi also adds on the same verse, it talks about God being angry. This is very interesting. How is it that we do not find any punishment that came upon Moses in consequence of the anger of God? Rabbi Yossi said to him, as a matter of fact, here too some definite result is mentioned. It says, is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? Which implies that Aaron was destined to be a Levite, the attendant on the priest, and not the priest. And I intended the priesthood should proceed from you, Moses. But now, because of your unwillingness to step up, he will be the priest, you will be the Levite. Which is just, to me, like sends a chill down my spine that the roles would be reversed. Now, amplifying on this theme, here's a midrash. All 7 days of consecration, Moshe was using the high priesthood, yet the Shekhinah did not rest in his hands. This is this whole notion that he set up the Mishkan and took it down and did all the sacrifices. And Shmuel Bar Nachman says, all 7 days at the burning bush, the Holy One was asking Moshe to go on his mission regarding Egypt. On the 7th day, he said, send whoever you will send, says Moses. And God said, Moshe, you are saying send whoever? Well, I swear that I will tie you by your skirts, which is a weird, but I'll hoist you on your own petard. When did God punish him? Rabbi Levi said, for 7 days, Moshe kept begging and praying to enter the land. And on the 7th, he said, because you will not cross this Yarden. That's in Deuteronomy. And another rabbi says, all 7 days of consecration, Moshe was using the high priesthood and he thought it would be his. On the 7th day, God said to him, "It's not yours, rather it is your brother's." So Moshe was like still, according to this midrash, hanging in, hoping to be the high priest.
Expecting to be. Where does it say hoping to be?
Well, I don't know about expecting. I mean, it could be either. It could be either. The question is, was he, it's possible that it was never disclosed to him that, it gets you into a real hall of mirrors of if Moshe knew the entire Torah because it had been dictated to him, did he kind of know the outcome? I don't know. But one question I do want to ask, this switch of roles of Moshe becoming, of Aharon becoming the priest and that spiritual leader, and Moshe becoming maybe a little bit more the political leader, I don't know. Was that the right assignment of roles for these two brothers? What do you think?
Could Aaron have led them through they wouldn't have followed Aaron.
Right.
And when Aaron was in the position of leadership, when Moses was on top of Sinai, look what he did. He followed the people rather than lead the people.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Claudia.
Just the modern thing of, the people who are founders of startups, who have the creativity and the courage and the chutzpahdik and the whatever, to start something, they're often not the people to build it and continue it, be the CEOs.
That's wonderful. There's, different kinds of leaders for different stages, different times. And I think that's just such a wonderful example.
Yeah, in the Torah, there's a lot of times where it's not the eldest son who takes, it goes away from the first son.
All of Genesis is about flipping.
Yeah.
All of it, every time, over and over. But Merle, I want to do you're the segue meister today, because you're giving me all these great segues. Let's go to the golden calf, because I think that is such an interesting illustration of the ways in which Moshe was the right leader for the 40 years, and Aharon as sort of stand-in was really not up to the task. So that's Exodus 32, verse 19, and we're going to read 19 through 25. And Annette, you want to read?
Sure. As soon as Moses came near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, he became enraged, and he hurled the tablets from his hand and shattered them at the foot of the mountain. He took the calf that they had made and burned it. He ground it to powder and threw it upon the water, and so made the Israelites drink it. Moses said to Aaron, "What did this people do to you that you have brought such great sin upon them?" Aaron said, "Let not my Lord be enraged. You know that this people is bent on evil. They said to me, 'Make us a god to lead us.' For that man Moses who brought us from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him. So I said to them, 'Whoever has gold, take it off.' They gave it to me, and I hurled it into the fire, and out came this calf." I don't know that this makes him such a good religious leader, frankly.
You think?
Yeah, go ahead.
Moses saw that the people were out of control, since Aaron had let them get out of control, so that they were a menace to any who might oppose them.
Okay, thank you. That's fine right there. So, look, it certainly illustrates the point that Aharon was not the kind of person to stand up to the mob, whereas Moshe basically, came out there and slaughtered, 3,000 people, or led to the slaughter of 3,000 people. So, how might this connect to the Shalshelet of "and he slaughtered"? So let's think about their interpersonal relationship as opposed to anything so symbolic.
Like Moses may have some hesitation about turning over the ritual leadership of the people to his brother, who, I don't know, I just threw the gold in and out came this golden calf guy.
Right.
I think maybe. And maybe Aaron also, who had been chastised for what he had done, may also be filled with some hesitation about taking this august position of leadership in front of all the people. Like, do I really have it in me?
Well, he doesn't get a Shalshelet, but you might be right. There could be, in addition to Moses's potential lack of faith that Aaron is up to the task, maybe Moses is still pissed, right? I mean, maybe he's like, I left it to you for this, brief period of time, and you failed me. So I don't know, but it certainly is another way to interpret this sense of hesitation.
Could I just say something? I'm just
Yeah, please, Claudia.
thinking about, I mean, this is more as a therapist, I'm thinking, but Moses confessed and did an amends for the sin. It says a little further on in Exodus. Backing up a little bit. So God says to Moses, say that take the Levites rallied to him.
Yeah.
Take the sword, go kill the people who did this. But Aaron was not killed.
Right.
So did Aaron, but it never says that Aaron apologized, never said, mea culpa, I'm wrong, I confess, I'm returning. He never did teshuva. He just sort of gets gathered back in, and Moses is the one who goes to back up the mountain and said, and asked for forgiveness in 31. Yeah. So
you're asking a great question.
So if there's not a process of amends, that could also lead to this, like, wait a minute, there's something we haven't quite done, but yet we're here, we've got to go with the moment, we're ready.
Yeah, well, so maybe it makes you wonder whether there's an apology that was never rendered, that Moshe felt needed to be rendered. And the other question that you're raising, Claudia, is how is it that Aaron commits this sin in the golden calf and has a hand in it, and at the same time is never punished for it? It makes you wonder about the death of his two children, Nadav and Avihu, at the end of this inauguration ceremony, which we will read in the next Parshat. I think that the sin of the golden calf hangs over all of Vayikra and all of the rest of this, and there'll be various different places if we do some studies together where we'll see it show up. And I want to make sure that I have enough time to sort of deal with the rest of it. So I'm going to skip a little bit of the Nadav and Avihu episode, although I just want to know, for those of you who remember, this is one where his sons get incinerated for no reason that you can really figure out, right? And Aaron, is struck dumb, and Moshe has literally, well, not literally, but very few words of consolation. And most of it is, go back and do your job. So it's a really seemingly cold-hearted response from Moshe, which gives you a sense of Moshe as a man of duty. Now let's go on, though, to one thing, because there's some description that we've gone through of tension between the brothers, but there is a very beautiful midrash with regard to the love between the brothers. And so this is a legend about the death of Aharon, which happens in the book of Numbers in Bamidbar in Parshat Chukat. And it's about how Moshe broke the news to Aaron of his death. And the commentary is on a verse where God tells Moshe and Aharon that it's time for Aharon to die, to be gathered to his kin, and to die on Mount Hor. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to Moses, "Do me a kindness and tell Aaron of the death of which I am embarrassed to tell him." What did Moses do? He rose very early in the morning and went to Aaron's dwelling and began to call out, "Aaron, my brother." Aaron came down to him. Aaron said to him, "What did you see to make you rise so early and come here today?" Moshe replied, "I was pondering a matter in the Torah last night, and it was very difficult for me, so I rose early and came to you." Aaron said, "And what is this word of Torah?" Moshe said, "I don't know what the text is, but I do know that it was in the book of Genesis. Come, let's read it." They took out the book of Genesis and read through it section by section. And about each one, Aharon said, "How wonderfully and beautifully God created." And when they reached the story of the creation of Adam, Moshe said, "What will I say about Adam who brought death to the world?" Aaron said, "Moses, my brother, don't speak that way about this matter. Mustn't we accept the decree of God? How Adam and Eve were created, how they merited marriage and joy in the Garden of Eden, how they ate from the tree. And then, as it is said to him, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. After all that praise, to such did they come. Said Moses to him, and I, who ruled over the ministering angels, and you who stopped the death and the plague after the Korach rebellion, isn't our end going to be like this? How many more years do we have to live? 20? Said Aaron, they are very few. Moses subtracted and subtracted until he mentioned to him that very day. Immediately, Aaron's bones felt it, and he languished. Said Aaron, perhaps this word is intended for me? Said Moshe, yes. Immediately, Israel saw that his stature shrank, as it is said, and all the congregation saw. Said Aaron, quoting Psalms, my heart is void within me, and the terrors of death have fallen upon me. Said Moshe, do you accept to die? Said Aaron, yes. Said Moses, let us ascend Mount Hor. I get chills reading that.
You sounded like you were getting choked up.
I was a little choked. I've read it a couple of times. I cannot read it without being choked up. That there's a beauty in their relationship. Very quickly, and then we'll close. When you look at the Torah and you see how often Moshe is mentioned first and how often Aharon is mentioned first, they kind of bounce around. And there's actually the first time their genealogy is given to us, you hear about Amram, and it says Amram gave birth to Aaron and then gave birth to Moses. And then a sentence later, it says Moses and Aaron. And in a very weird way, the order is flipped, like one right next to the other. It's Exodus 6, 26 and 27, you'll see it. And Rashi comes in to say this is in order to indicate that they were of equal weight in all respects. And so I want to give you Rabbi Sachs, who's always such an eloquent writer on this. He describes Moshe's Shalshelet this way. That is Moshe's inner struggle conveyed by the Shalshelet. He's about to induct his brother into an office he himself will never hold. Things might have been otherwise, but life is not lived in the world of might have been. He surely feels joy for his brother, but he cannot altogether avoid a sense of loss. Perhaps he already senses that he will later discover that though he was the prophet and the liberator, Aaron will have a privilege that Moshe will be denied, namely, seeing his children and their descendants inherit his role. The son of a priest is a priest. The son of a prophet is rarely a prophet. What all four stories tell us is that there comes a time for each of us when we must make an ultimate decision as to who we are. It is a moment of existential truth. Lot is a Hebrew, not a citizen of Sodom. Eliezer is Abraham's servant, not his heir. Joseph is Jacob's son, not an Egyptian of loose morals. Moses is a prophet, not a priest. To say yes to who we are, we have to have the courage to say no to who we are not. Pain and struggle is always involved in this type of conflict. That is the meaning of the Shalshelet. But we emerge less conflicted than we were before. So we reach the end of the chain of the Shalshelet appearances in the Torah. And it's an invitation to look at the whole Torah, even the markings, the stops. There's a midrash about Rabbi Akiva being able to interpret the crowns. And these are ways to sometimes go into deeper meaning. And for me, as we see these episodes of Torah strung together, we think about our life's journey and how each moment passes through our fingers like pearls in a necklace of unknown length. And when we reach a stone of indecision that asks us to confront our internal conflicts and decide who we really are, may a proper resolution come to us, one of peace, that shows that those around us are not our rivals, but our brothers and our sisters. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah.
Shabbat
Wow.
shalom.
Wow.
Brilliant lesson, Rick. Rich,
Oh, thank you.
wonderful.
Um,
Thank
And you
you.
led us through it. Absolutely wonderful.
I know we're done, but I did have a factual question. Did Aaron did not grow up with Moses, right?
That's very true. And let's talk
They
about
were
it. Yeah.
brothers at birth, but then when did they join up again and say, "Hey, you're my"? I mean, right? Moses was in the.
Yeah.
So
Good question. So here's how I come at it. Moses died at 120. He spent 40 years wandering with the Jews in the desert, which was pretty much right after the Exodus. So I think Moses was 80. He must have been close to 80 when they reunited around the burning bush. So that's a long time. And so go ahead. You want to continue on?
no, that's you. You're making my observation is that they aren't brothers or sisters like we think of them. They are genetically connected, but the first 80 years, they weren't siblings by practice.
Yes, go ahead, Annette.
I also want to know how Aaron's life got saved.
He was older.
You're
Yeah,
saying
but
we got
wasn't the
saved-
firstborn supposed to be killed?
But that he was
That was-
before the edict.
Yes, very good.
Oh,
Right. He's
that
3
what
years
the
older than
rabbis
Moshe.
say?
He's 3 years older than Moshe. So
so the
Well,
edict.
Miriam came in there somewhere.
what's that?
Miriam came in there somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know where Miriam.
I
yeah,
always thought Miriam was between the two brothers. But
I
maybe
think if Miriam was standing on the bank.
Bank, yeah,
before
she
he
was
went
it had to
alive.
be more than
She was
3
older.
years old.
I think she
Yeah,
was older.
Much older.
right, and she talked to the, yeah, she was talking age,
Yeah, yeah.
because she talked to the princess,
Princess, and she brought her mother.
yeah.
And we see Susanna's contribution in the chat. Hopefully, don't lose that he who hesitates is lost. Apparently not a Jewish concept. So Torah concept. Thank you. Wonderful.
Okay,
Well, thank you for being on the journey here. And
that was absolutely great.
That was
Very good.
amazing, Rich. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Beautiful.
Shabbos.
Shabbos Chag Sameach. Have a great Pesach.
You
Terrific. Thank you.
All right, take
Thanks
care.
for letting me listen.
Yes. Thanks for
You
joining
Chag
us.
too.
Sameach,
Bye-bye.
Shabbat Shalom.
Okay,
Bye.
welcome.
Really
Shabbat
good
Shalom.
class.